I'm Chris Heilman. I've been in web development since 96, 97. I did like old websites like HP. I did visitbritain.com, McDonald's.co.uk. Then I worked for Yahoo for 4 years and worked on Yahoo Answers and Yahoo Maps, and dabbled in all kind of services there, the front page, the finance page. And then I went to Mozilla for 4 years and did the whole Firefox OS thing. And now since February, I joined Microsoft. And because I just wanted to be where the problems are, and I wanted to fix the web from within. But I'm coming back to that in a second, because this talk is more or less one of those ranty old men tells you that you're doing everything wrong thing. But it's more about a loss that I found in the community that we have here. Because when I started as a web developer and the whole Zeltman thing started, it was all about solving issues. It was all about problems that we had, like technical issues. And nowadays, everybody knows the web, everybody uses the web, and we get very excited in like bashing each other about who's got the shortest JavaScript library to fix the thing that we didn't need to fix in the first place. And I'm getting very tired of us as at the same time of us as the people that do open web not going to any of these conferences. I find there's more disconnect between conference than anything else. And I know what I'm speaking about because I spoke at 42 conferences in 27 countries last year. So I see all the different ones and I'm like, there's no intermingling. And in essence, something on the web needs input from everybody. A designer can really break what you try to do as an accessibility person, or an engineer can break everything, because that's what JavaScript is for. So, yeah. So I want to start to get it up to a level where it's artsy. I want to talk about this quote that is from one bands that I know that got me into England where I live. These are dangerous times we live in. I heard a man once say, if you're prone to flights of fancy, your dream might fly away. And I think we had that problem the last few years, that we tried to get fancier and more interesting, and we forgot about the basics of what the web tried to do. And when you go to places like Syria, or to go to places like Africa, and you go to places where people see the web as the only source of free education, the only source of talking about their governments without being censored, which in America can happen really soon as well, it's a very important thing for people, and we just treat it as this like, oh my god, we get paid lots of money and we have free food, and that's just not enough. Like, we should make better websites. It's something, a gift to humanity that we have somehow forgotten about. So we're here at the Open Webcam, which is about dreams that I try to make sure to come true over the last few years. And the dreams are simple dreams. They're actually good dreams that people can benefit from. And they're not even technical. To me, it's maintainability. How can I build something that can stay up the next few years and people can actually work on? Accessibility, of course. How do I make it available for people independent of their ability, independent of their location, independent of their connectivity or their phone? Predictability. How as a developer can I build something that I know is going to work rather than having to test every single step on the way? We get very excited about our testing methodologies and our testing platforms, but in essence, do we really need this? The idea of a standard was that we shouldn't have to test in everything. But when we release a browser that is not on every platform, people go crazy, like, I want to test it immediately, so you already expect the browser to break all the time? But we wanted predictability, that's why we did standards. That's why we went away from document all and document layers and needed document get element by ID and doc element by tag names. Flexibility, like the whole concept of like there is no screen size. There is not even a screen anymore with IoT things. That's something that is, to me, the main core of the web. And for years and years, we always have to fight the same issues. People talk about above the fold and below the fold still. In design, they did that for years, but now we talk about it in performance. Like the CSS that is above the fold on your phone should be inlined and everything else should be loaded later. And you're like, well, my phone changed sizes every 3 months when I get a new phone. What are you talking about here? Extensibility. How can we build something that works and gets better when you put new things in, rather than just building something that is for the moment has to be discarded 2 months later because there's a new framework coming around. And us who were the battle scars of the memory of pre-HTML5 and CSS days see simple solutions to these problems. We say, stick to web standards. This is what helped us to get rid of Netscape 4 and get rid of like Internet Explorer 5.0 and these kind of things. Bet on the open web. Open technology is always better than closed technology. Practice our craft. See it as a craft. Don't see it as a job, as a 9 to 5 and then go home. See it as something that you want to do. Question everything and don't assume functionality. Browsers will not have JavaScript enabled, not because people are bastards and turn it off, but because something went wrong. If it has no URL and can't be view sourced or crawled, don't trust it. This is the faux web. And this is the kind of thing I hear all the time when people talk about native versus the web. And I find that all of these things are true, but they're also a bit hardlined. You know, we sound like a religion by now, or like a dogma, rather than like all engineers that want to work with other engineers and other designers. For record, I don't like the word engineer at all. I'm a developer. Developers develop something, they do something and they make it better and they change it over time. Engineering means you have to plan it and build it. Nobody builds a bridge halfway through and then starts re-evaluating it. That's what engineering is. Developing a bridge is like find the money to get the thing in there, see where it is, where is the best thing to do. And we have a few bridges in London that have been built and they don't go anywhere. So whenever you see tourists on top of that thing, yeah, you lost your way, you don't know where you are. It's amazing. And of course, we had the old enemy that's easily to blame for everything. Internet Explorer was the Antichrist and probably was planned in the blueprint in Hitler's bunker before he died. That's the browser that does everything wrong and everything else is better. That's why we have to say whatever we do, Internet Explorer is to blame. And that was a lot of things that I had when I worked for Mozilla. I talked about Firefox OS, I talked about new APIs, I talked about the beauty of HTML5, and everybody came up to me and said like, well, I got to support Internet Explorer. And I found it to be an excuse in a lot of cases, because these people didn't even test in Internet Explorer. They just said like, our clients will never use that new stuff. So I did a drastic thing, so I joined Microsoft. Because I thought, yeah, okay, if that's really the issue, and I believed it as well. I said, like, the problem with old browsers is that they can't get updated, and we have to cater for them somehow. And I want to know the reasons. I want to know what we can do with that. So I wanted to help with the most important change that the web very much needed, and that is taking Internet Explorer, letting it go into pension, and go out on the field and play with other old browsers or go fishing or something, and give it a new browser that now is operating in Windows 10 is the new browser, Microsoft Edge. Internet Explorer is only there for backwards compatibility with like systems that have been built only for it, which sadly enough are quite rampant still, especially in inside systems of Microsoft. A lot of them I need Internet Explorer for. But we do the same mistake with other platforms. We now hear like, you need Chrome for this. Bad mistake. Same mistake we did with Internet Explorer back then. So we now have the new Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is dead. Microsoft Edge is the new browser. And I was super excited about this because we did everything right in this case. That sounds weird, but we did the thing that I wanted to do. The plan was very simple. Burn Internet Explorer and let a new browser emerge from the ashes. Some of you might remember we did this before with Firefox back then. And that's what we did. We forked the browser, and we kept all the low-level plumbing, like reaching the file system, talking to the operating system itself. But the rendering engine, we started from scratch, and we said, like, let's get rid of all the stuff that is Internet Explorer only, because nobody uses that stuff in the right mind anyways. So there's things like VML, attach event, current style, the layout quirks, VB script, conditional comments. All these things are gone. And there's nothing more beautiful than seeing developers that are allowed to delete code. Because, you know, like every program manager will tell you, like, yeah, release this now, and in 2 months' time, we ask the client for more money so we can clean it up. Lie. That never happens. It's like those cash points you see in London that say free money. That's also a lie. The money comes from your bank account if you get it out of them. It's not free. It just says it's free to get it out there. And then we said, okay, let's replace all the stuff that we don't need anymore with goodness. Let's put the beautiful, the gluten-free kale kind of code in there that we need to have. And we did that. We released 200,000 unique lines of code. And that's not comments, that's real functional code. 200,000 lines gone. Document mode's gone. 600 APIs that nobody outside of the Windows ecosystem ever needed was removed. And then we added 300,000 lines of new amazing stuff. Things that have been defined by the W3C, by the What Working Group, all the APIs that we get to know and love the last few years. 55 new standards, 55 new APIs that have been defined in HTML5 and in the What Working Group work, whatever standardization thing. And I was happy, and I'm like, this is cool. We now have a browser that is basically the thing that you do. That's what I thought. I was crazy enough to think in 2014 or 2015, we make a browser compatible with the standards that we define, we put it on the web, and everything will be fine, and we can go for ice cream and ride unicorns. Until I found out that we had to do 4,200 plus interop fixes. And we're not the only browser that has to do that. Every single browser has to do that. What does that mean? There are many, many webs. This is the same website. I'm not going to say who it is, obviously. On a mobile device on 3 different browsers. On Safari, on Firefox, and on Internet Explorer 11, or Edge actually, it's the wrong logo. 3 different websites, one of them useful, the other 2 rubbish. Because obviously everybody has iOS, because that's what my neighbor has, that means the world has it. And this is what we have right now. People are checking for browsers still, like user agent sniffing, like trying to parse a pack of lies that is the user agent and give you some information. So we found out we have a wonderful browser that can render everything that's on the web, and we'll never know because nobody gives us the content that we need. So we took the user agent and we put Chrome's user agent into our browser and sent it out on the web and looked at all these websites and started deleting and started editing and started contacting these websites and saying like, this is broken and what can we do about this and what can we do about that? Of course, this doesn't scale. So we used the Bing crawler and we put a headless Microsoft Edge on that, and we sent that out to the internet to index 42 million websites or something like that, and do regression testing with screenshots of like which is rendering how in Safari and in this one and what the problem is. And we found out that there's lots and lots of issues. So we had to do a lot of aliasing inside the browser. So WebKit prefixes, functionality that is wrongly implemented in other browsers, but people rely on. We had to put that into our browser, and it felt dirty. We had a lot of showers, and there was a lot of group hugging, and like, it's okay, you gotta do it. But, and Firefox is in that space right now as well, because people are not seeing the context of experimental. Experimental means it's not reliable. That's the idea. This is when, like in chemistry classes, when things blow up and there's like steam and stuff. And experimental, on the other hand, yeah, if it works on iOS, it's probably the right thing because they make the most money. So that's probably the right thing to use. So you got things like WebKit appearance none, which is put on every form element on this planet, it seems, so people can style it afterwards. So that means that WebKit doesn't give it any internal styling, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And this was great. This was a dating site, where without WebKit appearance none, like in browsers like Firefox and Internet Explorer and MS Edge, your gender was either a radio box that's full or an empty radio box. There was no label there. There was no information what that thing actually means. It was just visually there. So on Safari, it totally worked. You can press the one for man or woman. I mean, this might be an interesting thing if you want to go to a dating site and you're a bit more on the interested for new experiences, but I think it's just very bad interface, because it's just like relying on this was just painful to see. The other one is gradients. Gradients sometimes just look okay, but in a lot of cases white buttons with white background, because they didn't put a background color in there, just a WebKit gradient. So you have to highlight the whole website to actually start clicking on things. This was my favorite, because you think the most basic things would be understood and embraced by people, because we got very excited when HTML5 came out, and we didn't have to type this one in anymore. So the UTF-8, which character encoding that you're using, used to be this meta HTTP equivalent content type, content equal text HTML semicolon char set equals UTF-8. And then in Internet Explorer, in HTML5, we said meta char set equals UTF-8. Excellent, so much easier. And I've seen talks over and over, like 10 tag, every single time, like, nobody remembers the first one. The second one is so much easier now. And then you go on the web and you find that people type UTF-8 without the dash in it. Oh. And then you get this wrong encoding. And then you think, yeah, okay, 2 or 3 people, over 600,000 times on GitHub. People just copied and pasted wrong code all the time without thinking. They're like, oh, that person was clever, they probably don't make mistakes, I'll copy that one in. I call that full stack overflow developers. Just copy everything you find and just build something with it. So things I learned working for browser makers inside, like under the hood, and especially for the ones that are not open, it's interesting what we have to deal with. It's a constant race not to break the web. Every mistake web developers make needs to get catered for. My favorite was pointer events. Pointer events is an interesting concept to be independent of which event comes in. If it's a keyboard, it's a mouse, it's a stylus, it's a, I don't know, blowing into your computer or dancing in front of it, whatever we're going to do in the next few years. And then people say, like, why do you only do pointer events and not also touch events on desktop? The problem is, as soon as you support a touch event on desktop, people give it the mobile interface, because that's how people test that you have a mobile phone. It doesn't, because we're the only company evil enough to give you things that are touch screens and keyboards and things, but others will do that as well. And it's just not a safe assumption. The pressure is immense. Instead of actually celebrating that all browsers are doing the standards and are actually, I only have to write to a standard and it will work in all the browsers, people continuously ask like, oh, Chrome just did that. It's very experimental and behind the flag. Why haven't you thought of that? Well, because we're not Google and we don't have spies in their office telling us what in 2 weeks' time they're going to release. The same with like Firefox saying like, oh, why didn't we innovate the way we Googled it? Because we're not them. But people compare browsers all the time, and I think to me this has to die. In essence, a browser to me should compete on the interface for the end user, like the bookmarking interfaces, the sharing interfaces, the input, how can I write on the screen, can I do something with it, and where does it store my data? The way it renders web pages, the APIs it supports should be the same in every browser. That's why we have standards. But instead we get very fanboyish about what one browser does that is not standardized that another browser should support as well. So when implementing standards, we find a lot of problems with them and feed back to the standard. So whenever you see like html5test.com, that browser has 2 more features than the other one, so that's the better browser. A lot of these HTML5 standards, when you implement them in a rendering engine, you find a lot of bugs in them. And then when you implement them on the web, you find even more bugs. For example, ES6 that I'm doing a lot of work with right now, there's an array.contains method, which allows you to say, does this array have this thing inside? A native method, excellent, wanted to have that for years, because in PHP we had that since 1992 or something like that. And we implemented it, and then we found that an old version of MooTools had an array contains that overrode that one and broke it completely. We found the same thing with array constructors and Zepto. So a lot of libraries that people have been using that solved every problem at this moment don't get removed off the web anymore. And if you went there now with an ES6 compliant browser and the website wouldn't work, who do you blame? The library? No, you blame the browser. So we have to put lots of buggy code or rename things in the standards after the standards have been ratified to not break the web. And most speed increases is based on analyzing and fixing developer mistakes and sloppiness. The JavaScript engine has been, for example, sped up 1.5-fold compared from IE11 to Edge, because we start analyzing every for loop, and people still do an iteration, on every iteration, a length reading on for loops, which makes no sense because the array length doesn't change, but now we analyze the for loop before we actually turn into bytecode, and we read that length and don't have to do that anymore. Which is good. Learning from other people's mistakes and making a better library is good. But too forgiving is also sad, because we just assume developers to make mistakes all the time by now. And I thought our job was to write code, not to write bugs. But back to what we do here. Most of the best practices we celebrate are just promises. We've been telling people for years that if you write towards a standard, then it will work across every browser. Whereas, on the other hand, as soon as we released the thing, we put 12 libraries on top of it and broke it. And the HTML5 parser being forgiving doesn't help there either. The biggest thing we promise people is longevity and reuse of their work. If you adhere to standards, in 10, 20 years' time, this thing will still run and you don't have to change it. Which of course is true, because the first Apple website still works, the first Microsoft website still works, the Space Jam website is always the greatest example of that one. This one is still out there and works. But I don't know, we keep talking about these philosophical constructs. My favorite was like Jeremy Keith, who I like a lot, good friend of mine. The web is not a binary, 1 or 0, on or off. It's not a platform where you get 100% or 0%. It's this continuum. The web is not a platform, it is a continuum. That was the quote. Which I think is 100% true. It is to me a medium. It's a publication platform, not a software platform. It's deep, future-focused thinking. We need this kind of thinking. It's insightful. It's like, oh my God, continuum, that's true. It's inspiring, yeah. I work on something bigger than just a software platform. And it's also techno-hippie horse shit. Because in essence, like if you go to somebody who has to release something for a certain budget and you tell them you're going to be part of the continuum, You know, that's the guys that stand on Market Street in San Francisco and want to measure my blood pressure or something and tell me how my life is going to change. I'm scared of these kind of people. That's kind of weirding me out, because like I have stuff to deliver here. So what am I doing now? Our promises of now and future success and everlasting reuse are not an incentive any longer. We came out of that terrible world of the first browser wars, where we're like, if you write it for Microsoft, then you have to write it for Netscape, then you have to write it for Opera, then you have to do that. And then Standard said like, now you have to write it once and it will never have to change. But the kids these days that start developing, the people who come into the market never had that pain. They never understood the value of the standard, because for them it's a given. The internet itself is not exciting anymore, it's plumbing. It's like I turn on the water and the water comes out. Kids don't know what offline is anymore. The other day I had a truck run into one of the boxes in my street, and I didn't have internet for 3 days, and I started twitching and I had hives coming out and all kind of stuff. And I was the only one in my whole house that complained about it, because everybody else was always on their mobile phones. They didn't even realize it, they only said like, oh, Sky Television might be off. No, the internet is off. The internet is off, what's wrong with you? You should be on the street burning things and things, but no, they don't. So it's a given, and we still tell people, oh, it's that amazing thing that you in 5 years' time will still work the way you do it right now. The cool, new, and exciting things aren't web technology based. These are like the interactive watches and the self-driving cars, which of course have not been inspired by 80s TV shows at all, but have been a completely new idea. Nobody thought of that stuff before. But it's great, because I love that kind of innovation, like Google's Soli project, for example, that uses radar to detect my fingers on top of a smartwatch. That's great stuff. That's cool innovation. I loved how easy it is to shock that market right now. I wrote a blog post when I got my first smartwatch as a test platform, and I basically wrote that I didn't like it, because it's like it's just an external monitor on my wrist for my mobile phone that I touch, and then I can't see the thing that I'm supposed to interact with. So I was like, this is weird. And then I got invited for a conference in London about the expert of being wearables, because I bitched about it on my blog. And then the BBC introduced me as like, oh, wearables expert Chris Heilmann from London. And I'm like, this is how easy it is? This is scary. Like, turn off the heating at IoT conferences, because there's so much hot air coming from stage already. It really works out. But computing changed, and the most important platform works on other principles than the web. And the most important platform, we shouldn't kid ourselves, is mobile. And that's not only here, but that's also in the emerging markets. When I went to Africa, when I went to India, it's all on mobile devices, because they don't have the wired connection in the ground, much like America doesn't really have it. But they have none at all. So for them, it's all starting with mobile devices. And I think that's great, but at the same time, the mobile space just doesn't like the web. It treats the web like the red-headed stepchild that you just have to deal with, but you don't want to talk to. So mobile has been sold to us as totally different. The app is a much better form factor than websites with URLs, because typing URLs on a mobile device sucks. Everything needs to work offline. Everything needs to be much simpler interfaces. People are busy and on the road. It's always like, yeah, people will only interact with your app when they're running, trying to catch up or train. They're like, no, they're sitting at home as well in front of the television and play with their phone, or play wherever with their phone. Okay, let's be honest, 90% of the apps are used on the toilet. So optimizing for that use case might be the best option. So every app should take full advantage of what the operating system and hardware offers, and that's totally true. Sadly enough, none of the mobile operating systems give us this functionality in JavaScript or with our browsers. We have to write native code. So the biggest thing the web needs to match, I think, is actually making money. That is what we actually don't talk about. Because with mobile, you can make money. With the web, you get ad blockers. The only thing, whenever I talk to people about websites, how do you make money? The only thing, we put ads on it. Really? This is all we have to show in 20 years? We didn't think about what else we could do, but try to charge for a website. That's not going to happen. People will crack that thing instead. I love that in my hotel in San Francisco, the shampoo is called Mega Rich Conditioner and Mega Rich Shampoo. And it was in San Francisco, it wasn't like Sand Hill Road or something like that, it was just like weird. Regardless of the hype numbers, and there is a lot of hype in mobile, like most use case of the web of mobile is actually taking selfies and using Facebook or chat messengers. People don't use apps as much as we wish they did or the market tells us. Native platforms allow you to make money. Mobile native platforms have monetization plan that is not show some ads. It's you pay for stuff, and people expect that on a mobile device, except for Android, but still even there. But on iOS, you just expect it to be crap until you put some money in it. On the web, you just expect to get everything for free and block ads, and at the same time get everything free still. It's incredibly easy to spend money on iOS. That's why people don't realize how much money they spend on it, which is probably something to look into, but it's not as hard as like saying on the web, like, oh, click this, and now enter your credit card details, and now the 5th character of your password, and the 2nd character of your password, and the penultimate letter of your password. That's my favorite. For non-native English speakers, like, what is penultimate? What's going on here? And it's just made to type your password in wrongly 3 times, so you have to call them. I think they get money for getting these calls. There's no preconception that everything is free. People don't expect everything for free, but on the web we expect everything for free because piracy was a normal thing to do. Like, oh my God, this Netflix doesn't have that movie. There's a streaming website that does everything for free. That's very easy to use, right? Yeah, what does it do in the background? My favorite when people like, when you're not in America, just go a VPN. You can buy a VPN for $6 a month, and then you can watch Netflix US, and you're like, and your whole data goes through some Russian or Chinese server that you have no idea about. But good, you paid for it, well done. Everything releasing on iOS means you target an affluent audience, and that's something we don't talk about too much. These are the richest people. It's actually market research releasing something on iOS first. And then that's why it takes us 8-9 months to get the Android version of any game, because people know on iOS, people spend money. On other platforms, they don't. So payments for upgrades are a normal thing. Like, okay, Angry Birds, thank you for playing that for 5 months. You want Angry Birds 2? That's a different app, pay it again. On the web, it's like, Yahoo, you like that one? Yahoo 2, you have to pay for the new version of the website? No, not gonna happen. But in these closed environments, it's very much a normal thing. And we're still far, far away from that, being able to deliver that on the web, because the mobile web, according to The Verge, sucks. And I have to agree, the amount of websites that I open and then it takes about 20 seconds, then it asks me to download a native app instead of the content that I just loaded, is rampant. The amount of pop-ups that I get, the amount of like information that it reminds me of 998 when we had all the pop-ups all over and then we put pop-up blockers in. Now Apple does an ad blocker, which is kind of ironic, but it's quite interesting to see. And The Verge was getting lots and lots of flack for this article because the website itself was interesting. It was 87 requests and 7 meg of data to read the 1600-word article. And that's not the worst thing, because it also uses 35 different privacy trackers that tracks you and records you what you're doing just to read an article. We turned the web into a lifestyle magazine that spies on us. And we made it in our image, which is obese. It's just incredible that the average website is 2 megabytes. And I was in Albania the other day where my data contract with my UK provider would be £12 per 10 megabyte. Which means loading the average website would cost me $9. Your website better be good for that. You know, it better be really, really interesting and give me the information that it does. But most websites, you go to a restaurant website, it shows me a video of their chef or something like that rather than the telephone number, the menu and the address, which is why I go there. The rest can come when I go there, because a picture of the food always looks better than the food. And I live in England, I know what I'm talking about. So on mobile, the deck is stacked against the web. It was from the beginning defined as a non-open platform and a platform to make money with. This is what the whole mobile, well, not the mobile internet, but the mobile app economy is about. Browsers and the technology platform is even worse. Browsers are hardwired and update only with the operating systems. This is the Internet Explorer 6 problem on every platform right now. Of course, Android is now evergreen, but only if you use the Play market, which nobody in China or in Russia wants to do. So even they get outdated old browsers on these operating systems, and they never get replaced. That's why I was scared with smart TVs. If you spend like $6,000 on a TV set, and then you have a browser in there that's not going to get updated in the next 20 years, that's just terrible. Browsers are built by many different players, all with their own agenda. I just got a phone from a provider, and the browser in there, I don't even know, it's a WebKit fork from something, but I had like 50 apps on there I never wanted to use, but I had them. They all have their music provider, they all have their video provider, they all have their own browser with all kind of extra helpful functionality and lots of background images that I don't want to have. And the more you control the experience, the more competitive you are. Let's not beat around the bush. Apple is the market leader because they control the software, the hardware, and the distribution. That's an easy task. If you do all of these things, you never have to deal with partners, you never have to deal with delays, you do everything yourself. So control is the winning thing on the mobile web, and that is completely not what the web is about. And even feature detection doesn't help us. Like PPK gives this great talk about the Chromia, about the different Chromes and all the different platforms. And it really is like that. He tests everyone and says like, this will not work on that phone, in that edition, in that country, sold in that month to that guy. And that's the kind of fragmentation we have to deal with. So whenever we lose something, we have these 5 stages of grief. It's like death or like breaking up a relationship. And we have the same with the open web and the mobile world. We have denial, we have anger, we have bargaining, we have depression, and then we have acceptance. The denial was my favorite one, when we said like, it's just a fad, it will go away. Don't worry if millions of people buy phones, they're going to come back to the web sooner or later. If we build our own operating system based on HTML5, the closed environments will learn from that and actually copy what we do. Yeah. And surely the simplicity of web standards and the amazing value of microformats and properly structured HTML will never cease to amaze new developers. Like they don't want to go for like the voice recognition or the tracking of your phone or stuff. They're actually more excited about closing their P tags. Then we go with anger, and that's all about scapegoats. It's the fault of our users. They do all the things wrong, like using outdated browsers and turning off JavaScript. It's the fault of our clients. They only want crap and nothing exciting that pushes the envelope. It's the fault of the tool creators. We need to match what native has in terms of tooling, and then we can all write unicorns and have ice cream. It's the fault of the browser makers. They just don't innovate quickly enough and to match what mobile can do. And every time browser makers innovate in an experimental fashion, we just put it and see it as given and we put it on the web, making it worse for all the browser makers because they have to match that again. PPK 2 days ago released a blog post which was like a bit of a turd in the punch bowl of the party, because it was all like, let's stop innovating the browsers for the next year and then analyze the things that we're doing right now and make everything work. And you're like, good luck with that. And of course, like every browser outreach department, one large one with from Mountain View, went down on him like a ton of bricks. Like, yeah, what are you talking about? Like, we need to innovate, we need to be fast. And sadly enough, we're in this endless loop. Technically, why not analyze what we have right now? Why not make some of the things work better? But as the competition between browsers is all about how many features do you have for developers right now, that's where we focus on. So the 5 stages of mourning for the open web go further on with bargaining. Then we did things like, let's do a stopgap solution like PhoneGap that allows you to write web stuff and make it into native things. And when the platforms allow JavaScript to access all the hardware APIs that we need, we don't need PhoneGap any longer. And that's been a successful thing for 4 or 5 years now, and PhoneGap is sadly enough not going away. But we're like, if we do it, then they're going to copy it and everything will be fine. Let's define lots of APIs from the expert groups. Let's have a mobile task force. Let's have a API task force, hardware task force. Once we write the APIs, Apple will embrace them and love us dearly and actually use our stuff instead of their stuff. Let's inject browsers with our apps into the platform. Crosswalkproject.org is actually really interesting because it allows you to take a new Chrome and put it into an old Android. So the Androids that don't get upgrades for the for the browser anymore or the web view anymore now have a browser that you control. The only issue is that your app is 17 meg without any of your own code because you have to put a browser inside. But it's in essence what Chrome frame was for Internet Explorer, and that went away rather quickly as well. And then we get depressed and we say, like, we tried everything, we got angry with people, we offered them to make all the solutions for them. Let's concede defeat. Another PPK article was like, let's say we cannot beat native because it's just not possible. You can never match what native offers and never innovate as fast. Let's consider a new career, goat farming, for example. Sounds like a great investment. Let's try to find recognition elsewhere, maybe in a similar group of people who care about what I do. And seeing that I was at 42 conferences in 1 year, it makes me wonder who we're actually talking to and who we're trying to impress and how much code we're actually writing to show on slide decks rather than ever release. Because we get far too excited in an understanding group being excited about our stuff rather than trying to solve the problem outside. This is called, there's a wonderful concept of procrastination. Procrastination, people always think like, oh, we do it because we're lazy. And actually, we do it because we're afraid. Remember in school when you didn't do any rehearsal, when you didn't do any learning until the day before the test? You do that because if you fail the test, you can say, oh, I didn't rehearse enough. You don't have to feel stupid. You don't have to think, I failed that test because I wasn't clever enough. It was always the excuse of saying, like, I didn't have time to prepare, that's why I failed that one. Next time it will be better. And that's the same that we're doing right now. We show off to each other rather than going into real production, going into real websites that we have to build and put the new stuff in there. Hide it in there. Your boss doesn't know. Every single innovation I put on the web in the last 20 years, I snuck in. Or I released as open source and then I asked the legal department if that was okay after millions of people looked at it. There's no way that we actually can innovate just by showing cool stuff and then go into production later. And then acceptance. Maybe this is just another form factor. Maybe we don't have to match what native does. Maybe web is better than that, and web has different cases that will come sooner or later that native cannot match. Because native is limited. It's one use case. It's one thing that you have to rewrite. I mean, you had to rewrite every single app when we went from iPad to iPod to iMovie, whatever, and with Surface Hub and these kind of things, and HoloLens and Google Glass, not anymore, but Google Glass maybe in the future, or VR. There's so many things coming. These are all form factors. We can match that with the web sooner or later, but we don't have to be everywhere. We say that native fights the web, but at the same time we try to shoehorn the web into every other environment as well. That's as arrogant. So maybe there's a space for more than one form factor. Imagine roads. You can go there, you can walk on them, you can cycle on them, or you have a car. Software can never be this flexible. That's not what software is about, right? Maybe it's just time to reflect and improve what we have. After all, there's a lot that needs fixing. And as a browser maker, I know that now. And it never occurred to me that I'm, as a web developer, I'm part of that problem. Because I keep putting things on the web that are half finished and never go back to them and rely on them. The web is designed to work independent of hardware, software, ability, or location. That's what Tim Berners-Lee, or Timbo as I call him, whenever he comes around, he said this is the web. And I think it's a beautiful idea. It's exactly why I started it. But we have to start analyzing it a few years later now and say, like, is this really viable? Is this really what we want, or does this mean we're always catering to the lowest common denominator? And we don't really excel in anything without having to say it needs to work for everybody. So the spirit animal of the web, I think, was the platypus. It was this, like, we did not know what the thing was. But probably evolution had a plan for it. We're not quite sure yet. And we just see what we can do with it. It can live in water, underwater. It has this weird beak. I love the German term for it, which is Schnabeltier, which means beak animal. Can you imagine, like, the zoologist standing there like, what the hell is that? Do you have a name for it? Well, it's got a beak. Excellent. You know, it's still a beak animal thing. But I think we moved from that, and we were, as the web community, we were this. We talked to designers, we talked to engineers, we talked about accessibility, we talked about information architecture, all these cool things. And I think we turned more into the Hyrax, which is this animal that sleeps 17 hours a day and always looks pissed off. And whenever I talk about innovation on the web, I get, like, the hardliners of the open web to shoot it down in flames, like it's not backwards compatible, so you're actually killing kittens if you try to do that and you're a terrible person. And I think we have to move out of that frame, because otherwise become unnecessary, because people want to innovate. You right now only hire engineers if you do cool stuff. And it costs you a lot of money to get engineers into your thing, because we're in a bubble. It will happen again that it crashes, and then people will start hiring people who know stuff and build stuff rather than rock stars or ninja. I always like when people try to hire ninja, because a good ninja is not seen. Or people say, I want you to be a rock star developer. I want to wreck a cubicle then and see what they do with it. You're like, you want to be a rock star? The web's full of rubbish, and it's time to clean it up, and instead of adding some more, maybe we should think about it. The problem is that we have lost our voice and focus. We are here talking to each other. This is a $10 event with lots of good speakers, and it's more or less empty. You know, it's not, people are not running here like they run to WWDC, where you spend $2,500 for getting nothing, except for a big show of what's coming next and what you only as the elite that comes here can see. Innovation happens a lot in browsers in a very experimental fashion, and that's not going to go away. So that's why PPK was wrong, saying, like, can we just stop a year? That's not going to happen because the competition is too important to us. and especially for listed companies where the stakeholders want to see you succeed in everything that you do, including your browser. A lot is purely engineering driven and relies on a lot of abstractions. Like a lot of the new stuff, every new API that comes out now is dependent on promises. And ES6 promises is dependent on ES6, which is a syntax error in old browsers. So we changed the language to not even backwards compatible anymore, and every new API is dependent on that. We should be up in flames about this and get very angry about it, but I'm actually thinking about this is not a bad thing. It's time to cut and say like, okay, here's new functionality that Internet Explorer 5 or 6 will never get or never understand, so why do we even bother basing it on ES5 that is only supported in these old outdated environments? Why don't we just make a tabula rasa and do something sensible there? The starting point for developers became much more complex. I love the whole concept. Text editor, view source, learn something, mess around with it, publish it. Nowadays, I want to write CSS. Oh yeah, you need SAS and you need to have a MacBook Pro and you go to your terminal and then you have to set up your terminal differently because yours looks terrible. There's like cool color coding in the terminal now. And we go from abstraction to abstraction to abstraction, and we, instead of just telling people, hey, build something on the web, it's that easy. We got very excited about our own little world making that one better. It's a full-time job to keep up with JavaScript and platform innovation. You can, I love it when you go to like, this is the cool new platform, and I'm like, a week later, I'm like, oh, I found some time, let's look into it, but then the first blog post, like, this new platform is not to be used anymore, come out. So you feel like, wait, I tried, but okay. And business reasons trump user experience, sadly enough. And that's what that mobile web, that's what that Verge strat is about. 35 trackers, that is not because users asked for that. That is because people wanted to know more about the users that they should know. In HTML5, we have a great design principle called the priority of constituency, because it's a standard, so it's really hard to pronounce and almost impossible to remember. So the case of conflict, consider users over authors, over implementers, over specifiers, over theoretical purity. And I think this is something that we should embrace much, much more, even in our outreach about open web technologies. It's about the end user in the end. Like if they have something broken and they still want to be there, our job is to make everybody consume the web. That's the web is about. It's open to anything. If that's a broken environment, we still should be writing code that's paranoid enough to still run in those environments. So enough with the empty promises. The web is a given now. People don't care about it as much as they did in the past. People just have the web. And sadly enough, they mostly use it for watching like little videos and trailers and like these kind of things. The making part of the web is becoming less and less. People put less things in there except for screen grabs of TV shows in GIF format, so there's like 7 megs for something that is not funny. But that's like, oh, look what I have. Or I want to have emoji because English is so hard. This means that that what we offer as solutions needs to have immediate benefits, not a glorious future that might ever come. Doing the open, standardized web thing needs to be the thing that immediately makes it better. Not the one that like in 5 years' time, you can still have the same code. In 5 years' time, I might be a goat farmer. We had that already. We should analyze some of our best practices. Backwards compatibility means we never break the web, but we also carry ballast with us. We just keep getting held back by backwards compatibility. And I'm not saying that you should block out old browsers. I'm just saying you should not give them anything. You should give them HTML and CSS and make a static web page that reloads when they click on a submit button. That works everywhere. Google still works like that. Turn off JavaScript in Google and you get a search box that works. Turn on JavaScript and you get the autocomplete and all the fancy things and all the extra content. That is exactly how we should be building things. People will use what is the most simple first, then the things that are the right thing to do. Let's offer simplicity. Developers use these libraries because it's easier to use it than to understand the still in flux standard that is written in some vernacular that only professors understand. So make it easier to understand. jQuery was a big success because it solved people's problems and it was very easy to write. I think it caused a lot of problems, but also that showed us how to market to the next developers. And not just saying like, oh, you should be this 20 years time, we'll be still running, don't worry about it now. And you're like, well, my boss told me I have to change it next week. Yeah, but in 20 years time it could be running still. And enough with the constant criticism. The hierarchy thing, like us as the open web people being very arrogant and very aggressive with everything that comes out. Every new thing that gets shot down in flames immediately because it forgot one thing to do right. And that's not helping us. Let's analyze the reasons why someone violated our best practices. Why did they not have alternative text on these images? Why is the subtitling on Netflix rubbish? The subtitling is rubbish because it's publication laws. They cannot get the better quality ones in some countries because subtitles and videos are different distribution models in different countries. So that's why, for example, when I watched Daredevil on Netflix in Sweden, I got all the Japanese scenes only with Swedish subtitles, which was very, very insightful, and half the TV show didn't make any sense to me. But they couldn't buy the English subtitles in Sweden because they're not released for the Swedish market. So think about that stuff when it comes to like, why don't they caption? They're bastards, they hate everybody who's not perfect. The squeaky wheel does get the oil, that's true, but it also gets replaced when it keeps squeaking. When people always like, yeah, go to Twitter and tell Microsoft that they're bastards if they don't do that. And if you do that continuously, then it's going to be really happening. Like, badger people on Twitter because it's too hard to actually file a bug report. Seriously, if you want to have anything done in browsers, the best thing to do is not to make a public stink, but go to a mailing list, go to a bug tracker, file a bug, because that's where the engineers are. These are the people that can implement the thing. And these are the people that give you the technical answers rather than the social media consultants on Twitter that tell you like, yeah, but actually it's not that much of a problem and that shiny thing, you know. Go where the problems are. Go where the people are. And don't think that you can shame companies into making innovation and fixing things. You can, but you waste a lot of time. You don't really innovate. You just grandstand if you think about it. If the fix of the thing we criticize doesn't yield any overall benefit, we won't reach people at all. Use headlines, use articles, use sections, because the outline algorithm of HTML5 is the most amazing thing and is not implemented in any single browser. So telling people off for not using sections and articles until browsers do something with it is completely wasted time. My favorite was always microformats, like put these 12 classes around your HTML to turn it into an address, to turn it into this and turn it into that. As long as browsers don't do that as a hover and turn it into an address that you can click and get to your address book, this is wasted effort. This is technically beautiful. This makes us feel important talking to each other. But if the end users don't have any benefit from it, it's not going to get embraced. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just for us to as a recreational therapy or something, so we think we're actually doing something. And sometimes the web can be the wrong solution. I know, from me nobody expects that kind of thing, but I've seen native solutions that make total sense. And some of the things that we just learned when we shut down, for example, Java applets. We turned off Java applets in Microsoft Edge, and then we got like hundreds of emails like, our products don't work anymore. And I was like, your product didn't work for 10 years, just nobody told you. But for some of those, a desktop solution is the better solution. On the web, the security holes, the issues that we have on the web is sometimes not the right thing. But we think because we gained so much for embracing the open web, we think everybody else should as well. I don't think that makes sense. I think love and passion trumps everything. It trumps promises and it trumps trying to punish people. And I'm not talking about like that we have to sing Kumbaya and hug and kiss and like be very happy with each other, although, ladies, form a queue. Love to me comes in many, many forms, and I think it's so watered out it's not even funny anymore. Like, you know all these parallax websites that take like 5 meg of download and like don't really work on your phone slowly enough, and you scroll through the whole thing and in the bottom it always says like made with love somewhere. That's actually I think it's part of Bootstrap, like made with love something. I think love is a very, very important part of our life, and it's something that creates. It doesn't something that destroys. Hate destroys. Love just is always a creation thing, no matter what it is. It can hurt, but it actually makes things. Understanding to me is love. Our world has become much more competitive and mainstream. We're not the cool kids that try to fight desktop apps anymore. We're now what people use. The web is the boring thing. We're the guys in the suits now. And rather than like the innovative ones that say, look what I can do with my watch. We who care about the web should help newcomers calm down and see its flexibility as an opportunity, because you start as an engineer right now and you go to Hacker News and you think you didn't learn enough by the time you're in the third post. You think like everything that is shown to you is much cooler than you are. So the amount of like people who are suffering from imposter syndrome or getting depressed by being in an overpaid environment is absolutely amazing. So let's show people what we learned in the past and say like, yeah, this is great right now, but don't worry about this one, look at this one, this has potential. Be a mentor in that and not like, oh my God, these guys will never understand the web. Patience. We will see the same mistakes being made over and over and over again. And maybe that's a rite of passage. Maybe people have to make the same mistake before they become a good developer. Every single PHP developer has written a CMS. Every single one of them. All of them should never go live because all of them were full of XSS holes and all these kind of things. Every JavaScript developer now does some NPM module that nobody should ever use. Maybe that's something we need to do. Maybe that's a rite of passage that you have to do and to become a developer later on. Kindness. It's easy to criticize and simple to point out a flaw. It's much more rewarding to connect personally and ask for the reasons and offer a solution. Like, oh my God, Netflix has shit subtitles. Contact somebody in Netflix and ask why that is. Offer that, like, there's other services that do that better. Say, like, who's done it before? Like, find out people, start networking, start communicating, rather than pointing out the one thing that's broken. That's always a very simple thing to do, and it's very rewarding to do, because you were clever enough to point out that one thing. And the bigger a target is, the bigger a punching bag it is, the easier it is to hit. You know, I always call that prison tactics in like presentations. When people rant about like Google and Microsoft and Yahoo, if you beat up the biggest guy on the block in the first day in prison, the others will not pick on you. So you always go for the most like, oh look, I solved the problem that Microsoft had, because obviously they're very untalented developers who don't know what they're doing. The other one is interest. What makes people not go for open web solutions? Why did they start with iOS? Why don't they not understand that accessibility is not about turning on and off JavaScript? Where did they get this information from? Where did they find that information from? And what can we help to make that thing go away? Like W3 schools or things like that. Or go to Stack Overflow and give this one answer that is not a snarky comment, but actually points to something that works. What is the thing the alternative gives them? What is better in these native environments that the web doesn't have, that we cannot match yet? Openness. I think we never stop learning. Maybe some of the things that sound ludicrous at first can become a great idea with some tweaking. React right now. DOM's broken, let's do a virtual DOM. You're like, oh, I heard that 10 times before. But maybe the time is right now, because we cannot control the hardware, we cannot control the browser. Maybe that is really the bottleneck. But let's take a look at it and be open about it. We praise openness, but we don't understand people who criticize us, and we just call them out like, oh yeah, you don't understand it, we're just cooler than you. This is not how you help people. Sharing. Many things we consider a given got forgotten. And they keep getting forgotten. Like, people don't understand what labels are still around form elements. And our job is not to point out like, oh, you're terrible, you didn't put a label in there, but our point is to say like, if you put a label around this, the whole text becomes clickable. Oh, cool, I'm going to put that one then there. You know, give them something that's useful. And remind people of what we learned, how we got excited about it. And there's a good quote that if you start teaching, you end up learning. I used JavaScript professionally for about 6 years until I wrote my first JavaScript book, and then I realized that I had delivered rubbish for 6 years. But I got praised for it, I got bonuses for it, I got everything. I didn't understand the language I was using, I was just using it. And then when I had to write a book, I had to understand the thing I was doing. And that's something that I think everybody who is bored of their job right now or thinks they're not going anywhere, teaching other people something is incredibly rewarding. And if that means going to your high school and show them about new internet stuff, if that means going to offer a brown bag to an insurance company in your street, they're actually responsive to that. They want to have that kind of stuff. And you learn about presenting, you learn about showing your code, you learn about that you're not an antisocial programmer that just takes away buildings and makes it far too expensive to get a flat in San Francisco. And courage. I think we hear far too much from the loudest and the most known people. If you feel strongly about something, speak up and talk to me, talk to other speakers. We get lots of offers of conferences that we can't go to. So if you want to go somewhere and you want to do your own talk, and it is scary, I agree. It's easier when you're born ginger because people point at you anyways. So you basically just make a job out of it. But if you really want to do something, and the courage is what makes you actually find love in what you do. And I think it's important that more of you speak up that we don't know, and fresh voices are very important. And this already feels a bit like choir, always the same people talking to each other. So I'm happy that we have new people like Marcy and people here talking that you haven't seen before. it's important that we have new voices, so please speak up and become part of this, and not just be this Hyrex on Twitter that annoys people. And that's all I had, so thanks very much.